Two of my friends died drinking medicine that a pastor handed out after Sunday service. I was 10 years old. I wrote everything down because my mother told me that's what writers do. You observe, you record, you don't skip the parts that seem small because the small parts are usually the ones that matter most. A detail that looks like nothing in the moment sometimes becomes the reason everything holds together later. I didn't know I was writing evidence. I thought I was practicing. My name is Grace Green. My mother's name is Naomi. She works the overnight shift at a food processing plant on the south side of Houston, running a dough line that doesn't stop for 8 hours and leaves her hands aching in the joint of every finger by the time she gets home. She raised me to be careful. She raised me to pay attention. She raised me to tell the truth even when the truth is inconvenient, especially then. My father's name is David. He was a deacon at our church for 9 years. He was the one who gave me the diary. I used to think we were a good family. I used to think my father was the best man I knew. I was wrong about one of those things. This is what I wrote down. The FDA hearing room in downtown Houston was smaller than I expected. I had imagined something like the courtrooms on the television shows my mother watched on Friday evenings. High wood-paneled ceilings, a judge at an elevated bench, the kind of room where the architecture alone tells you that serious things happen here. Instead, it was a low-ceilinged conference room on the 4th floor of a federal building, with fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly and a long folding table at the front where 5 people in suits sat with laptops and yellow legal pads and paper cups of coffee that had been sitting long enough to stop steaming. The room was full. 60, maybe 70 people. I had not expected that many. My mother was in the front row. She had her hands folded in her lap and her back straight and her eyes forward, and she did not look to the right or the left. She had been sitting in that posture since we arrived 40 minutes early. The way she sat in hard situations, contained, deliberate, using the stillness of her body to hold everything else in place. She did not look at my father. My father was in the 5th row. He had come in late, 10 minutes after we were seated, and I had watched him from the witness prep room through the narrow window in the door. He walked in, looked around, and chose a seat near the back wall, in the section where a cluster of people I didn't recognize were sitting together. Then he paused. He looked toward the back of the room, where 2 television cameras on tripods were being positioned by technicians checking cables and adjusting angles. He moved forward, chose the 5th row instead. I had written a lot about my father over the past 11 weeks. I understood certain things about him now that I had not understood before, because when you write something down instead of just thinking it, it becomes clearer. The pattern becomes visible. And the pattern I had written about my father over 127 pages was that he was always thinking about how he looked. Not in a vain way, not in a way that anyone outside the family would have noticed. Just he was always aware of who was watching. He always positioned himself where the watching would be favorable. Even then, even on that morning, even in a federal hearing room where his daughter was about to read out loud the things he had said on the phone when he thought no one could hear, he was still thinking about how he appeared. I was 10 years old and I understood that about him now. I had written it down. I walked to the witness table at 11:15. The diary had a floral cover, pink and yellow flowers on a cream background, the kind of cover a 10-year-old picks out because it's pretty, not because she's planning to use it to document a federal criminal investigation. The lower right corner was bent from 11 weeks of being carried in my backpack and my coat pocket and clutched in my hands on buses and in waiting rooms. 127 pages. Some entries were a single sentence. Some were 4 pages. Most of them were in the careful, slightly too large handwriting of a kid who was still learning to write fast enough to keep up with what she was thinking. None of them had been written for this room. All of them had ended up here. The lead lawyer for Sterling Pharmaceutical looked at the diary on the table in front of me. He was in a charcoal suit, and there were 4 other charcoal suits behind him, and they all had the particular kind of stillness of people who do this for a living and are very good at it. "What we have here," he said, "is a journal written by a 10-year-old child. With all due respect to the witness, this document has no evidentiary value and cannot be admitted as." The federal prosecutor raised one hand. "This document records specific dates, specific dosages, specific symptom progressions, and direct quoted conversation. All of it has been verified against medical records and laboratory results independently obtained by this committee. The correlation is exact down to individual dosage notations on individual dates. A fabricated document cannot produce an exact correlation with independently obtained medical data. The document is admitted." The charcoal suit sat down. I stopped watching him because I was watching Reverend Solomon King. He was sitting in the defendant's section, at the far left of the front table, in a gray suit that was not as good as the suits he wore to church. He looked smaller than I remembered. I had known him since I was 4 years old. He had baptized me when I was 3 months old, according to my mother, though I didn't remember it. I had thought of him my whole life as a large man, large in presence, large in voice, large in the particular way adults are large when you are a child and you believe they understand things you don't. He did not look large now. He looked like a man sitting in a chair in a fluorescent-lit room, wearing a suit that was not quite right, waiting for something he could not stop. He looked at me. I looked at him. I did not feel angry. What I felt was harder to name than angry, a specific sadness that comes from having to update your understanding of something you believed in, from learning that the shape of something you trusted was different from what you thought. The way I imagine it feels to find out a story you were told as a child, a story you built part of your world on, was not exactly true. I had written about that feeling in the diary. I had written, "I thought I knew what he was." I wrote it down every Sunday for 4 years without knowing I was wrong. The investigator at the center of the table said, "Miss Green, before we begin with the entries, I want to ask you a simple question. Can you tell this committee why you wrote this diary?" I thought about it. Not because I didn't know the answer. I had thought about the answer many times over the previous 11 weeks. I thought about it because I wanted to say it the right way. The way that was true without being more than true. My mother told me writers have to observe everything and write it down, I said. My father told me the same thing. He told me I see things that other people miss, and that I should write them down before they disappear. I paused. I saw Marcus and Destiny getting sick after they started taking the medicine. I didn't know what it meant. I wrote it down because it seemed like the kind of thing that might matter later. The room was quiet. Did anyone ask you to write this? No. Did anyone know you were writing it? My mother didn't know until I showed her. My father. I stopped. I had rehearsed this answer and I still had to stop for a moment before I could say it the way I meant it. My father knew I kept a diary. He gave it to me. He didn't know what was in it. The investigator wrote something on her yellow legal pad. In the 5th row, I saw my father's hands, both of them resting on his thighs, pressed flat for a moment, then still. I looked at the diary on the table. 127 pages. Marcus Webb and Destiny Brown were in every one. I had written it for them in the end. Not for this room. Not for these lawyers. Not for my father or for anyone who was going to read it. For Marcus and Destiny. For the people who were not here to speak for themselves. To understand how I ended up in that room, you need to go back 11 weeks. You need to go back to a Sunday in September, to a neighborhood that smelled like good food and old wood and the particular kind of warmth that comes from a community that has been the same place for a long time. You need to go back to the day before the medicine arrived, when everything was still what I thought it was. My father used to say that Zion Baptist was the heartbeat of the neighborhood, And I thought that was a grown-up way of saying something true. On Sunday mornings, the whole block woke up differently than it woke up on other days. There was a particular smell, hair products and good perfume, and the kind of fried food people made in large quantities when they were expecting company. That told you before you even opened your eyes what day it was. Cars crowded both sides of the street and sometimes up onto the curb near the fire hydrant that nobody had reported in several years. Families came out of their apartments dressed in their best things, and the best things were always kept for Sunday, which meant that Sunday had a color to it that the other days didn't. I had gone to Zion Baptist my whole life. I did not know any other church. I had not known until the year I turned 10 that a place you have gone your whole life can become a completely different place in the space of 11 weeks. Reverend Solomon King had been the pastor of Zion Baptist for 30 years. He was 62 years old when I knew him. He had the kind of face you remembered, not because it was handsome but because it was specific, the face of someone who had lived a particular life in a particular place, and the evidence of both was visible in every line of it. He knew every child's name and called them by it, and asked after their grades and their piano lessons and their soccer games. He did funerals and weddings and baptisms and hospital visits. He was the person the neighborhood called when something happened and people didn't know what to do next. He was not a bad man. I have thought about this many times. He was a man who made a series of bad choices because the bad choices were presented to him in very good packaging, by people who were very skilled at packaging. That is not an excuse. It is a fact. Both things can be true. Marcus Webb was 8 years old. He sat in the third pew from the front on the left side, and he always had candy in his pocket, the individually wrapped kind, Jolly Ranchers mostly, and he distributed it after service to whoever was nearby without making a big deal about it. He had been doing this since he was 6. Nobody knew where the candy came from. I had asked him once and he shrugged and said, "I just always have some." Destiny Brown was 7. She chose the seat next to mine every Sunday without asking, the way people who have been friends long enough stop asking and simply arrive. She wore her hair in 2 puffs with bright barrettes, and she was the kind of person who found everything interesting, who asked follow-up questions in Sunday school until the teacher ran out of answers, who looked at the world like there was more in it than anyone was telling her. These are the people I am talking about. Not statistics. Not case numbers. Not 2 pediatric fatalities within acceptable parameters. Marcus and Destiny. The boy who always had candy and the girl who sat next to me because she didn't need to ask. My father was a deacon. He had been a deacon at Zion Baptist for 9 years, which meant he handled the practical work that kept the church running, coordinating the ushers, managing building maintenance, handling the money and the collection plates with the focused precision of a man who took every responsibility seriously. He wore his deacon's badge every Sunday, and he knew where the spare keys were kept, and he had the direct number for every contractor who had ever worked on the building. He took this role the way he took every role, seriously, visibly, with the awareness of a man who knew that how you did things in public was part of how people understood who you were. He was a good father. I want to say that first. For the first 9 years of my life, he was a good father. He came to my school plays and helped me with my math homework and made pancakes on Saturday mornings, and drove my mother to her night shift when the weather was bad so she didn't have to wait for the bus in the rain. He was present in the specific way that matters, not just in the house but actually there, paying attention, thinking about what you needed before you said it. The summer before 5th grade, he sat across from me at the kitchen table and slid a paper bag from the bookstore across the surface toward me. Inside, a notebook. Hardcover. Blank pages. Not a school exercise book, a real notebook, the kind people use when they mean what they're writing. "You told me you wanted to be a writer this year," he said. "I did." "Then you need to write." He put his hands flat on the table the way he did when he was being serious about something. Real writers observe. They watch what's happening around them and they write it down before they lose it. The small things. The things that seem like they don't matter. Write those especially. He tapped the table once. You see things other people miss, Grace. You always have. Write them down before they disappear. I held the notebook with both hands. It had a hard cover and smelled like a new book, and I had wanted it before I even knew what I would put in it. That summer I wrote about everything. The way our upstairs neighbor walked, the sounds the city made at 3 in the morning when I couldn't sleep, the exact color of the sky on the afternoon a thunderstorm came in from the west and turned everything green before the rain started. I was practicing. That was all. I was 10 years old and practicing being a writer. I did not know that the notebook I was practicing in would become a federal exhibit. I did not know that the man who taught me to observe and record would be the person I most needed to record. Sterling Pharmaceutical came to Zion Baptist on the second Sunday of September. There were 2 of them. The one who spoke was called Dr. Chan, not the FDA investigator I would meet 11 weeks later, a different Chan. And the one who stood to the side and smiled and handed out brochures was named Holt. They wore the kind of business casual clothes that are designed to say I am a professional but I am also approachable. And they stood at the front of the fellowship hall after the service was over, while people were still talking and children were running between the folding chairs. Reverend King introduced them with the warmth he brought to everything. Brothers and sisters, I want to share something exciting with you this morning, he said. Sterling Pharmaceutical has approached Zion Baptist to be part of a very special program. A brand new cardiac medication that will be provided completely free of charge to the children in our community. Sterling has specifically chosen communities of faith for this initiative because they believe in the power of trust and relationship. They call it the Faith Healing Initiative. Dr. Chun spoke for several minutes about the medication, something about cardiac development, preventive care, genetic vulnerabilities in certain populations. He used words I didn't know and delivered them with the confidence of someone who expected that confidence to do most of the work. Holt passed out brochures. The brochures had a photograph of children playing in golden afternoon light. My mother looked at the brochure, put it in her purse. My father was standing along the side wall with the other deacons, arms folded, listening. His expression was the one I knew as official deacon face. Attentive and reserved, not yet deciding. Are you going to sign me up? I asked my mother on the way to the parking lot. You're healthy, she said. You don't need anything from Sterling Pharmaceutical. She said it simply, the way she said things that were obvious to her. I accepted it the same way and thought no more about it. We got in the car. My father sat in the driver's seat and was quiet on the way home, which was not unusual. He often processed things quietly. What I did not know, what I recorded without understanding its significance, on the very first page of my diary that same night, was what happened after we left. I had been buckled into the back seat, and my mother was getting in when I looked through the rear window and saw my father still in the parking lot. He was talking to Dr. Chan. Not talking the way people talk after a church event, casual, wrapping up, about to leave. Talking the way people talk when something specific is being discussed. Dr. Chun was holding his phone with something on the screen. My father was looking at it. They spoke for perhaps 3 minutes. Then my father nodded once and they shook hands and my father walked to the car. He got in, started the engine, pulled out of the lot. Sorry, he said. Wanted to ask them a couple questions. My mother looked out the window. Said nothing. I looked out the back window at Dr. Chen and Mr. Holt walking toward their car. A black SUV with a bumper sticker I couldn't read from that distance. That night, I opened my new diary to the first page and wrote, September 14th. Today at church, Pastor King introduced people from a medicine company called Sterling Pharmaceutical. They are giving free medicine to kids in the church. Marcus is getting it. Destiny is getting it. I am not because Mom says I'm healthy. The man from Sterling smiled a lot but spent more time on his phone than looking at the kids. There was a woman called Miss Torres who had a clipboard. She checked boxes instead of talking to people. After church, Dad talked to the man from Sterling in the parking lot. They looked at something on his phone. They shook hands. Dad said he just had some questions. I don't know what questions. This is my first entry. I am going to try to write every day because that's what writers do. I closed the diary, put it in my backpack so I wouldn't forget it next week. I did not know yet what I had started. I did not know yet what I was going to find. I did not know yet that the man who gave me the notebook and taught me to write things down would be the reason I could not stop. The medicine was distributed in the fellowship hall after service, every Sunday, starting September 21st. Torres from Sterling Pharmaceutical set up a folding table near the side door with small paper cups of water and the medication. White pills in individual sealed packets, each one labeled with the child's name in printed lettering. She wore scrubs. She had a clipboard with a grid of boxes and she checked a box for each child who took their dose. She had a laptop open beside her. I noticed on the first Sunday that she spent more time at the laptop than she did looking at the children. She checked the boxes without looking up. She typed something after each child took the pill, before moving on to the next. A research coordinator, I would learn later, collects data. A nurse or a doctor looks at the patient. Miss Torres looked at her screen. I wrote this down. I also wrote down. Marcus took his pill and got a Jolly Rancher. The candy came out of Miss Torres's jacket pocket. I did not get one because I didn't take a pill. Destiny asked if she could have 2 Jolly Ranchers since her pill was bigger. Miss Torres said no and made a mark on her clipboard. I was 10 years old and I wrote this down because it seemed unusual to get candy at a medicine distribution and I thought my father would have said it was worth noting. The third Sunday of October, Marcus did not run in the parking lot after service. This was unusual. Marcus always ran after service between the cars around the light post at the corner, sometimes in circles for no reason other than that he was 8 years old and had energy that needed to go somewhere. It was as much a part of Sunday as the singing. That Sunday he sat on the steps of the side entrance with his elbows on his knees, watching the other kids. I sat next to him. "You okay?" "Just tired," he said. "You're always tired now." He shrugged. Not dismissively. The shrug of someone who genuinely didn't have a better explanation. I went home and wrote. October 5th. Week 3. Marcus didn't run today. He sat on the steps. I asked if he was okay. He said just tired. He has never been tired after church before. I am writing this down because it seems like a small thing, but Dad says write down the small things. His parents, I learned later, had noticed the tiredness. His mother had told his father that Marcus seemed low, that he was going to bed earlier, that he had not finished dinner the last 2 nights. His father said he was probably growing. It was the kind of conversation parents have when they are not yet worried enough to be worried, when the changes are small enough to fit inside an ordinary explanation. They did not connect the tiredness to the medicine. Why would they? The medicine was from a pharmaceutical company. The medicine was endorsed by their pastor. The medicine had been introduced as a blessing. In the 3rd week of October, my father started taking his phone calls outside. He had never done this before. For as long as I could remember, my father took his calls at the kitchen table or in his home office with the door open. He was not a secretive person, or he had not appeared to be one. Starting in the 3rd week of October, whenever his phone rang in the evenings, he looked at the screen, stood up, and went outside. I could see him from my bedroom window. He stood beside the truck, always beside the truck, not in the driveway, not on the porch, with the phone pressed to his ear and his body very still. The calls lasted between 12 and 20 minutes. He came inside after and went to his office and closed the door. I wrote this down. October 17th. Dad has been taking calls outside for a week. He doesn't say who calls. Mom doesn't ask. Tonight he was on the phone by the truck for a long time. He came inside and closed the office door. I could hear him typing. I did not draw any conclusions. I was practicing being a writer, not a detective. I wrote what I observed. I did not yet understand what I was observing. On a Wednesday in the 4th week of October, my mother went to see Dr. Osei. Dr. Paul Osei ran a family practice on Prescott Street, 3 blocks from the elementary school. He had been the neighborhood's doctor for 15 years. He was the kind of doctor who remembered not just his patients' conditions but their children's names and their parents' ages and the particular details of their situations. He had been seeing families from Zion Baptist his entire career. He had, in the previous 2 weeks, seen Marcus Webb and Destiny Brown on separate appointments, in the context of what their parents described as unusual tiredness and, in Destiny's case, lower back pain. He had run blood work on both of them. The results had made him very still in a way that results did not often make him still, because after 15 years he had learned to read results without reacting to them before he understood them fully. He read these results and was still anyway. Both children showed the same pattern. Elevated creatinine, indicating kidney stress.
Elevated ALT, indicating liver involvement.
In children this age with no history of kidney or liver disease, presenting simultaneously in 2 patients who knew each other, this was not something that happened by coincidence. He asked both families about any new medications or supplements. Both families mentioned the Sterling Pharmaceutical Program at Zion Baptist. He wrote down the name of the medication. He searched for it in every database he had access to. It was not there. A medication that does not appear in any pharmaceutical database is not a medication. It is an unknown substance being administered to children. He called my mother because she had asked him, months earlier, to let her know if he ever saw anything concerning involving the church program. She came in the next morning. She sat across from him and he showed her what he had found and she looked at the numbers for a long time. "What does this mean?" she said. "It means I need to file a report," he said. "And it means the children in this program need to stop taking the medication immediately." What do I do? Talk to the pastor. Bring what I'm telling you. Ask him to suspend the program until the medication can be reviewed. She thanked him and went home. That evening, she asked my father to come to the kitchen table after dinner. She showed him the names of the readings Dr. Osei had shown her, which she had written on a piece of paper. She explained what Osei had said. My father looked at the paper. "Osei is a GP," he said. "He's not a specialist. He could be reading the results wrong. He's been practicing for 15 years. In a neighborhood clinic. Sterling has research teams. Specialists. There's a reason they're running this trial. They have protocols, oversight. There are 2 children showing the same symptoms. Naomi." His voice was patient in the way it was patient when he had already decided something. "Osei doesn't know the full picture. I don't want you going to Reverend King with this until we have something more solid. You could damage the program. You could damage the relationship with Sterling. These are people who chose this community." She looked at him. He looked back. She folded the paper and put it in her pocket. I was in the hallway. I heard all of it. I went to my room and wrote it down. October 23rd. Mom went to Dr. Osei. He found something in Marcus's and Destiny's blood. She told Dad. Dad said Osei doesn't know the full picture. Dad said don't go to King yet. I could hear the way he said it. It didn't sound like he was worried about the results. It sounded like he was worried about something else. Meanwhile, Dr. Osei filed his preliminary report. He filed it on a Tuesday morning with the Texas Medical Board, noting the pattern he had observed and the absence of the medication from any recognized database. He filed a second copy directly to the FDA's MedWatch system. That same evening, his office received a phone call from a legal firm representing Sterling Pharmaceutical. The message was professional. It said that Dr. Osei appeared to be making claims about a Sterling research program without sufficient clinical basis, and that Sterling's legal team would be reviewing his conduct. The next morning, 2 attorneys arrived at his office. They sat across from him. They were very polite. They explained the potential consequences of making unfounded allegations against a pharmaceutical company of Sterling's standing. They spoke about defamation. They spoke about professional licensing. Dr. Osei listened to everything they said. He looked at the file on his desk, Marcus Webb's lab results, the elevated creatinine, the numbers that did not make sense for an 8-year-old boy without a history of kidney disease. He opened his laptop. He filed a second, more detailed report to the FDA, while the attorneys were still sitting in his office. "I understand the consequences of filing," he said. "I understand the consequences of not filing more." One of the attorneys said, "Dr. Osei, I want to make sure you understand." "I do," he said. "You can let yourselves out." They left. He closed the laptop, sat for a moment, then called my mother and told her what he had done, and told her that whatever was going to happen next was going to happen whether they were ready or not, and that being ready was better. She thanked him. She hung up the phone. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time, looking at the whiteboard on the refrigerator where she tracked the bills. The electricity bill was listed there, 3 months behind. Had been there since August. She looked at it. Then she went to bed. She would notice, for days later, that the electricity entry had been erased. The bill was paid. She did not know when. She did not know how. She would think about it for a week before she understood. My mother went to speak with Reverend King the following Sunday after service, when most people had cleared out of the fellowship hall. She had not told my father she was going. She had decided that telling my father first gave him the opportunity to tell her not to, and she had decided she was done being told not to. She said, "Pastor, I'm worried. Marcus is sick, and now Destiny is starting to show similar symptoms." Dr. Osei said. King raised one hand, gently, the gesture of a pastor who has guided many difficult conversations. "Naomi," he said. His voice was the voice he used for grieving families, soft, certain, the voice of someone with access to a larger truth. "Your faith is still a little weak. When God allows these trials to happen to our children, it's not a sign for us to question it. It's an invitation to believe more deeply." She looked at him. She had known this man for 11 years. He had prayed over her mother when her mother was sick. He had sat with her and David in his office when they were struggling and helped them find their way through. She had trusted him with the deepest things. "2 children are sick," she said. "The same way, at the same time, after the same medicine." Naomi, still soft, still certain. Trust in the Lord. Trust in the people He has sent to serve this community. Dr. Osei is a fine doctor, but he is one man with limited information. Sterling Pharmaceutical has teams of researchers. They have protocols. They have Reverend King's blessing. He smiled, kindly, genuinely, the smile of a man who believed completely what he was saying. "Go home. Pray. Let the Lord guide you." She went home. She did not eat dinner that night. I wrote. Mom came back from talking to Pastor King and she sat at the kitchen table and didn't eat. Dad asked how it went. She said fine. That is not what fine looks like. I did not know when I wrote that fine would look very different 3 weeks later. I did not know that Marcus had 3 weeks left. If this story is already making you angry, Share it. Because what happened next is worse. And more people need to know. Marcus Webb died on a Thursday. He was 8 years old. He had been in the Sterling Pharmaceutical Program for 6 weeks. On the Tuesday before he died, his mother took him to the emergency room at Houston Methodist because he had been vomiting since Sunday and couldn't keep food down. The attending physician ran blood work. The results showed acute kidney stress, creatinine levels more than 3 times the normal range for a child his age. The doctor administered 4 fluids and told his mother to follow up with his pediatrician within 48 hours. On Thursday morning, Marcus had a seizure in the kitchen while his mother was making oatmeal. He was unconscious when the ambulance arrived. He did not regain consciousness. He died at Houston Methodist before noon. The hospital record listed the cause of death as acute renal failure, etiology undetermined. No one at the hospital knew about the Sterling Pharmaceutical Program. No one had thought to ask about supplements or clinical trials, because Marcus's parents had been told the medication was a supplement, not a pharmaceutical, and did not need to be disclosed during routine medical care. This was deliberate. The FDA would confirm this 11 weeks later. Marcus Webb was 8 years old. He always had candy in his pocket. He had been quietly handing out Jolly Ranchers to the kids around him every Sunday since he was 6 years old, and nobody knew where the candy came from, and he never once made a big deal about it. If this broke your heart, share this story. Because a child is gone and most people will never hear his name. Make them hear it. Reverend King stood at the pulpit the following Sunday and said, "Our beloved Marcus Webb has gone home to be with the Lord. He was 8 years old and full of joy and faith. We do not question the Lord's plan. We trust in His wisdom even when we cannot see it." 12 families sat in those pews. 10 of them had children currently taking the medication. Not one of them made a sound. My mother made a sound, not loud, just a breath, sharp and involuntary. The kind that happens when something hits before you can brace for it. My father sat beside her and did not look at her. I looked at the spot where Marcus always sat. 3rd pew from the front left side. Empty. Not blank. Empty is not the same as blank. Empty is the shape of what is gone, and what is gone was a boy who always had candy and never explained why. I wrote about this later. I wrote, "Empty is not the same as blank. Empty is what a place looks like when someone who was always there is not there anymore." 3 days after Marcus died, Sterling Pharmaceutical sent 2 men to his parents' house. They arrived in the afternoon during the fog of the first week after a loss. The arrangements, the phone calls, the food that neighbors bring, the particular exhaustion of being surrounded by people who love you and still not feeling anything but the one specific absence. The men were very polite. They expressed condolences. They said Marcus's death was a tragedy and that they shared in the family's grief. They said the medical evidence did not indicate any connection between the program and his death. They had a document for the family to sign and a check for $15,000 they called a compassionate support payment. Gerald and Patricia Webb had not slept properly in 4 days. They had buried their son the previous afternoon. They did not read the document before they signed it. Nobody told them it was a legal waiver releasing Sterling Pharmaceutical from all liability related to Marcus's death. Nobody told them that signing meant giving up the right to sue ever for anything connected to the program. Nobody explained what it said because if they had explained what it said, the Webbs would not have signed it. That was the point. The same week, my father came home on a Thursday evening carrying an envelope. I saw it from the hallway. He came through the back door the way he always did. But instead of going to the refrigerator for water like he usually did, he stopped at the counter. He set the envelope down under a stack of mail quickly, the practiced movement of someone who has rehearsed where they are going to put a thing before they arrive. The envelope was thick, the kind that is thick because of what is inside it. He didn't open it at the counter. He stood there for a moment, then picked up the whole stack of mail with the envelope beneath it and went to his office and closed the door. I went to my room and wrote, November 6. Dad came home late. He had a thick envelope. He put it under the mail on the counter. He didn't know I was in the hallway. He went to his office and closed the door. I don't know what was in it. For days after that, I went to the kitchen for water before bed and looked at the whiteboard on the refrigerator where my mother tracked the bills. The electricity entry was gone. We had been 3 months behind on that bill. It had been on the whiteboard since August. The line where it was written had been erased cleanly, not scratched out, not written over, but fully erased, the way something is erased when you want it to look like it was never there. I stood at the whiteboard for a long moment. Then I wrote it down. November 10th. The electricity bill is gone from the whiteboard. We owed 3 months. Now it's paid. I don't know when. I don't know how. 1 week after that, I noticed something new on the whiteboard. In my father's handwriting, in the column where the monthly bills were listed. Truck payment, $410. My father had paid off the truck the previous year. I knew this because he had announced it when he drove it home for the first time. No more payments. We own it now. He had been proud of that. He mentioned it more than once in the months after. There was no truck payment. There hadn't been one for over a year. I wrote it down. I did not yet connect the 3 entries, the envelope, the electricity bill, the truck payment, into a single picture. I was a 10-year-old girl practicing being a writer. I was recording what I observed because someone I trusted had told me that the details that seem small are worth writing down. That person was my father. He was right about that, at least. On a Tuesday night in the second week of November, 2 men from Sterling Pharmaceutical came to our house. My mother answered the door. I was in the hallway where she could not see me, in the position I had learned to take when I needed to hear something without being told to leave. The men were polite. They expressed condolences about Marcus. They said my mother had been speaking with other families in the congregation, and that some of what she was saying was creating unnecessary concern. They said they understood she was acting out of love for her community. They had a document and a check for $25,000. Get out of my house, my mother said. One of the men said something about the program, the community, Sterling's commitment to the neighborhood. Get out of my house, she said again. They left. She stood at the closed door. I watched from the hallway. 30 seconds, long enough to be sure they were gone, long enough to decide what came next. Then she turned and saw me. Grace. Room. I went. I sat on my bed and looked out the window at the driveway. The men's car, a black SUV, was backing out slowly. I watched the license plate until I could read it clearly. Texas D48LKP. I wrote it down. November 12. 2 men from Sterling came to the house. They had a check, $25,000. They wanted Mom to sign something. She told them to leave. I got their license plate from the window. Texas D48LKP. I wrote it down because Dad says write down details that might matter later. Dad was not home. My father came home at 9:30 that night. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table. She told him what had happened, the men, the check, the document they wanted her to sign. Her voice was the careful voice she used when she had decided what she was going to say, and was holding to it. My father listened. He nodded slowly. Then he said, "You should have waited for me to handle it." She looked at him. "I have a relationship with people at Sterling," he said. "I could have talked to them and kept this from escalating. Now they know you're going to be a problem." Problem. I heard that word from my room. I wrote it down. Not the same as difficult, worse. A problem is what someone calls you when they are already on the other side of something. She said, 2 men came to this house with money to buy my silence about a dead child. And you're worried about escalating. I'm worried about you starting a war with a pharmaceutical company, based on what Jose thinks he saw in some blood work. His voice was still calm, the deliberate calm of a man managing a situation rather than responding to one. Sterling has research teams, specialists. If there was a real problem with the medication, they would know. Jose is one doctor in a neighborhood clinic. Marcus is dead. The kitchen went quiet the way kitchens go quiet when someone says the true thing in the room and there is nowhere for it to go. My father looked at the counter, not at his wife. I know that, he said more quietly. I know that, Naomi. But you going after Sterling based on what one doctor suspects is not going to help Marcus now. It is going to damage this family. It is going to damage the relationship this church has worked years to build. And it is going to make you look like someone who is too grief-stricken to think clearly. She did not say anything. He went to the bedroom. The door closed with the soft, deliberate click of someone who does not want to slam it but needs to end the conversation. I sat in my room and wrote everything I had heard. Every word. The order he said it in. The word problem. The way he talked about damage. At the end of the entry I wrote, he never asked what the document said. He never asked what they wanted her to sign. He just said she was going to be a problem. I don't know what that means yet. But it sits in the same place as the thick envelope and the electricity bill and the truck payment that shouldn't exist. It sits in the place where I put things I don't have words for yet. I keep looking at them. All 4 of them together. Like a math problem where you can see that something is wrong with the answer, but you haven't found the step yet where the error happened. I am going to keep looking. 2 days later I came home from school and checked the whiteboard. A new entry in my father's handwriting. December insurance premium paid. We had not had a December insurance premium come up yet. It wasn't due for 3 weeks. I stood at the whiteboard. I thought about the envelope. I thought about the electricity bill. I thought about the truck payment that didn't exist. I thought about my father saying you're going to be a problem and not asking what was in the document. I went to my room and wrote all 5 entries in the same paragraph for the first time, one after another so I could look at them together. Then I looked at them for a long time. I still didn't have the word for what I was seeing, but I was getting closer. I did not know that Destiny Brown had 3 weeks left. I did not know that when she died, everything I had written down would finally mean something specific. Comment justice for Marcus below. Say his name. Share this if you believe a child's life is worth more than a $15,000 check that grieving parents signed because nobody told them what they were signing away. Destiny Brown died on a Thursday. I noticed later that both children died on a Thursday. I wrote it down because my father taught me to write down the details that repeat, because repetition in data means something. He was right about that too. She was 7 years old. She had been in the program for 9 weeks, 3 weeks longer than Marcus. Started the same way. The tiredness first, then the back pain, then the vomiting. Her mother took her to the emergency room on a Tuesday. The attending physician found the same pattern that had been in Marcus's blood work. Creatinine elevated, kidney function deteriorating rapidly. Destiny was admitted to the pediatric ICU. The doctors worked for 2 days. On Thursday morning she went into cardiac arrest. She did not come back. The hospital listed the cause of death as renal failure secondary to cardiac complications. Different language than Marcus's record. Same cause. Same progression. Same timeline from first dose to organ failure. 2 children. The same medicine. The same church. The same Sunday distribution table with the clipboard and the Jolly Ranchers. Destiny Brown was 7 years old. She sat next to me every Sunday without asking because we had been sitting next to each other long enough that she didn't need to ask anymore. She always had follow-up questions in Sunday school, in regular school, at the kitchen table when my mother let her come over after church. She found everything worth investigating. She wanted to understand how things worked. She would have been very good at this, at what I ended up doing. She would have filled the diary faster than I did, and her handwriting would have been neater. Drop a share for Destiny. 7 years old. She deserved to grow up and ask every question she ever had. Share this so the people who made this decision have to answer for it. The night Destiny was admitted to the ICU, before she died, while she was still there, still fighting, my father took a phone call in his office. He closed the door. I was in the hallway doing homework at the small table we kept there because the kitchen table was crowded when my mother had her paperwork out. I could not hear words. I could hear tone. I have written about this before. Tone carries through walls in a way that words don't, especially when the walls are thin and the house is small, and you have spent 10 years learning the sounds of the people you live with. My father's tone that night was the tone of someone receiving instructions. Not asking questions. Not pushing back. Receiving and confirming and receiving again. The call lasted 11 minutes. I know because I counted the way I had learned to count things when I didn't have another way to measure them. He came out of the office and went to the kitchen and got a glass of water and stood at the sink. I kept my eyes on my homework. I wrote in my diary later. November 19th. Tonight Dad took a phone call in the office while Destiny is in the hospital. 11 minutes. His voice sounded like someone taking orders. I don't know who called. I don't know what the orders were. But I wrote it down because it happened the night Destiny went to the ICU, and that feels like the kind of detail that might matter. Destiny died 2 days later. Reverend King announced it at the Sunday service the same way he had announced Marcus. Our sweet Destiny Brown has gone to be with the Lord. She was 7 years old. We grieve. We trust. We do not question. He used almost the same words. I noticed. I wrote it down. After the service, while people were standing in the aisles collecting their things and speaking in the hushed voices of people who have just heard something they don't know what to do with, my mother stood up. She had not planned to. I know this because I was sitting next to her and I felt the moment she decided, a small shift, a breath taken differently than the one before it, and then she was standing. I need to speak, she said. The room went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when something unexpected happens. Not silence exactly, but the suspension of everything else. Reverend King looked at her from the front. Sister Naomi. Marcus Webb died 6 weeks into the program, she said. Her voice was steady. I had not expected it to be that steady. Destiny Brown died 9 weeks in. Both children showed the same symptoms in the same sequence. Fatigue first, then pain, then organ failure. That is a pattern. Dr. Osei has filed reports with the State Medical Board and with the FDA. The FDA is investigating. She stopped. Let that land. I am asking every family in this room who has a child in the program to stop giving them the medication until the investigation is complete. The room was very quiet. King said, Naomi, I understand your grief. Let me finish. He stopped. Whatever he saw in her face made him stop. 2 children are dead, she said. I do not know yet whether the medicine killed them, but I know that Dr. Osei, who has practiced in this community for 15 years, believes there is a connection. And I know that Sterling Pharmaceuticals sent lawyers to my home with a check and a document to sign. Companies that have nothing to hide do not send lawyers with checks. From the 5th row, Gerald Webb, Marcus's father, a man my parents had known for 12 years, stood up. She's right, he said. His voice was raw, the voice of someone who has been crying in ways they didn't know they could cry. I've been thinking the same. And then my father stood up. He was sitting 2 people away from me. I watched him stand. I watched him reach toward the aisle where one of the deacons was standing with the wireless microphone, and I watched the deacon hand it to him without hesitation. Because my father was a deacon and deacons handed each other microphones, that was how it worked, and nobody thought to wonder in that moment whether handing him the microphone was the right thing to do. He held the microphone the way he always held it, with the practiced ease of someone who had stood in front of people many times. He waited one beat for the room to focus on him. Then he spoke. "My wife is in tremendous pain." His voice was warm, reasonable, the voice of a man explaining a difficult thing to people who needed help understanding it. "She has been carrying an enormous amount of grief since we lost Marcus, and now Destiny too. Think we all have. And when we are in that kind of pain, it is human to look for a reason. To look for something to be angry at." He paused, looked around the room in the way good speakers look around a room, making contact, including people, making each person feel seen. "Dr. Osei is a fine doctor," he said, "but he has been suspended pending a review of his conduct by the state medical board." What Naomi is describing, a connection between the program and these deaths, comes from a suspended doctor's preliminary read of some lab results. It is not confirmed. It is not proven. And taking that uncertainty and turning it into an accusation against a program that Reverend King has endorsed, that has been designed by medical professionals, that is serving this community. He shook his head slightly. That is not what these families need right now. What they need is to grieve. Together. What they need is each other. He looked at Gerald Webb. "Gerald," he said, "I know you're hurting. We're all hurting. But let's not let that pain be directed somewhere it doesn't belong." Gerald Webb looked at my father for a long moment. Then he sat down. My mother was still standing. She looked at my father with the expression of someone who has just watched something happen that they cannot immediately name. Not shock, because some part of her had seen this coming without knowing she had seen it, but the specific feeling of the thing you feared becoming real. She sat down. She did not say another word in that building. I was sitting to her left. I reached over, under the edge of the pew where no one could see, and took her hand. I held it for the rest of the service. She did not look at me. She kept her eyes forward and her back straight, and she let me hold her hand. I wrote about it later. November 24th. Dad took the microphone today and told everyone Mom was grieving and not thinking clearly. He said Dr. Osei was suspended. He talked about Gerald Webb like he was helping him. Gerald sat back down. Mom sat down too. She didn't cry. She just sat. I held her hand under the pew where nobody could see. She let me. I don't have a word for what Dad did today. I've been trying to think of one. I don't have it yet. But I wrote down everything he said in the order he said it so that when I do have the word, it will be there waiting for me. That night, I heard my father on the phone again. Late, after 11, when the house was supposed to be quiet. I had been lying awake, which I had been doing most nights since Marcus died. The kind of awake that isn't restless or anxious exactly, just alert. Like some part of my brain had decided that sleeping fully wasn't safe right now. His voice came through the wall. The office was directly behind the wall at the head of my bed. I could hear tone again. Not words. The rhythm of the sentences, the pauses, the cadence of something being reported and confirmed. Then, for one moment, his voice came up slightly, not loud enough to be heard in the rest of the house, but loud enough to come through the thin wall to where I was lying with my ear 3 inches away. I heard, "I shut it down today. When does the second payment come through?" Then his voice dropped again. I heard nothing else clearly. I lay in the dark for a long time. Then I turned on my bedside lamp and wrote, November 24th, late. Dad was on the phone after 11. I heard him through the wall. He said, "I shut it down today. When does the second payment come through?" I think it means what Mom tried to say at church. I think the second payment is money. I think I know what the thick envelope was. I am writing this down. I don't know what to do with it yet, but I'm going to keep writing it down until I do. I turned off the lamp. I lay in the dark and thought about Marcus's empty spot in the third pew. I thought about Destiny's follow-up questions. I thought about the whiteboard in the kitchen with its erased electricity bill, and its invented truck payment and its early insurance premium. I thought about my father's voice saying I shut it down today through a wall at 11:30 at night. I thought about my father handing me this diary and telling me, real writers write down what they observe. I thought about how a person can be right and wrong at the same time. Right about the observation, wrong about what it meant to tell me to do it. I fell asleep eventually. I don't know when. The following Monday, Reverend King called Sterling Pharmaceutical. I did not know this when it happened. I learned it from the FDA's case file 11 weeks later, when Agent Chan showed my mother and me the communication records. King called the direct line for Dr. Elena Voss, the head of the research program, and told her that the FDA had been contacted and that there were questions being raised within the congregation. Voss listened. Her response, recorded in the communication log because Sterling's phones were already under a separate federal monitoring order, was, "Reverend, you need to understand that 2 fatalities within a 6-week window is within the parameters we establish for this phase of the trial. The protocol is sound. The community response is manageable. We need you to continue holding the line." King said. 2 children are dead. People are asking questions. Voss said. That's why we have you. Hold the line. King was quiet on the call for 4 seconds. The transcription noted it as a pause. I think it was the moment he understood what he was in this arrangement. Not a partner. Not someone whose faith community had been selected for a special honor. A shield. Someone whose name and reputation and 30 years of community trust existed, in Sterling's calculation, to absorb exactly this kind of friction. He said, "I understand." He held the line. He would continue to hold it for 3 more weeks, until the night he drove to my mother's house and stood on the porch and found, finally, that he could not anymore. But that is later. Comment Justice for Destiny below. 7 years old. She sat next to me every Sunday. She asked every question she had. She deserved every answer. Share this if you believe that what happened to her should never happen to another child. It was a Tuesday. My mother had come home from the factory at 11:15, late even for her night shift, because 2 people on the dough line had called out sick and they had run short-handed for the last 3 hours. She came in through the back door and set her bag on the counter and stood there for a moment with her eyes closed, doing the thing she did when she was very tired but needed a few seconds to become present before she could manage anything else. I was at the kitchen table. I had been waiting, not because anyone had told me to wait, because I had spent 3 days rereading the diary from the first entry to the most recent, and I had spent those 3 days understanding something I had not understood while I was writing it. When you write things down as they happen, you see each thing separately. When you read them back together, you see what they make. What they made was a picture I did not want to be right about. But it was right. And I knew it was right. And I had been 10 years old long enough to understand that knowing something and not saying it does not make it less true. It only makes you the only person carrying it. You should be asleep, my mother said, without opening her eyes. Mom. I put the diary on the table. There's something I need to show you. I've been thinking about the right time to do it, and I don't think there is a right time, so I'm going to do it now. She opened her eyes and looked at me. Then she looked at the diary on the table. She sat down. How long? She said. She was looking at the floral cover, pink and yellow flowers, bent at the lower right corner. Since September 14th, I said. The first Sunday. She picked it up, turned it over in her hands. looked at the bent corner. She opened to the first page. She read, "I have thought about what it must have been like to read it, and I cannot fully imagine it because I was not the one reading it. I was sitting across from her at the kitchen table watching her face, which is a different thing." She read the first entry. Ms. Torres's clipboard, the Jolly Ranchers, Marcus being handed candy after his dose. Her expression did not change. She read the entries about Marcus getting tired. Her jaw tightened slightly. She read the entry about the conversation I had overheard through the bathroom wall at church. October 31st. A woman from Sterling was on the phone in the church bathroom. She didn't know I was in the stall. She said, "2 fatalities within parameters. Community compliance remains high. Recommend continuing phase 2. My mother stopped. She read it again. She looked up at me. "You wrote this on October 31st, she said. "Yes." "Marcus died November 3rd. "Yes." She looked back at the page. She was very still, the stillness of someone doing a calculation that they already know the answer to and are checking anyway, because the answer is the kind of answer you check twice. She turned the page and kept reading. The entries about my father took longer. I watched her work through them. The thick envelope on November 6th, the electricity bill erased on November 10th, the truck payment that had no reason to exist. I watched her pace herself through each one, not rushing, reading each entry the way she read everything important. Once through, then back to the beginning of the same section, then forward again. She stopped at the entry from November 24th. November 24th, late. Dad was on the phone after 11. I heard him through the wall. He said, "I shut it down today. When does the second payment come through?" She read it once. She read it again. She put the diary flat on the table and looked at it. Not at me. At the diary. At a 10-year-old girl's handwriting on a piece of paper with pink and yellow flowers on the cover, recording a sentence she had heard through a wall. The kitchen was quiet. The refrigerator made its low sound. Outside, a car went slowly down the street, headlights sweeping across the window for a moment, then gone. My mother sat at the table for a long time. I did not say anything. I had said what I needed to say. The diary said the rest. Finally, she looked up at me. "Did anyone ever ask you to write this?" she said. Her voice was careful, the voice she used when she was managing something large. "No." "Did anyone know you were writing it?" "You didn't know." "Dad knew I kept a diary. He gave it to me." I paused. "He didn't know what was in it." She looked at me for a moment. There was something in her expression I did not fully have a word for then. Something between grief and precision, the expression of a person who is in pain and is also at the same time thinking very clearly. "Grace," she said. In the entry from October 31st. The woman in the bathroom. She said 2 fatalities. Yes. Marcus hadn't died yet. Destiny hadn't died yet. No. I looked up fatalities the week after I wrote it. After Marcus died. That's when I understood what she had been saying. My mother looked at the diary. I looked at my mother. The clock on the microwave said 2:11. She reached across the table and picked up her phone. Dr. Paulo Say answered on the second ring. My mother had known he would. She had called him late before, in the weeks since Marcus died. And he had always answered because they had both understood, without discussing it, that the calls she made at this hour were the calls that could not wait until morning. "Paul," she said, "I have something. I need you to hear it." She did not explain what it was on the phone. She told him to come to the house, that night, right then, as soon as he could. He arrived at 2:45 in the morning. He sat at the kitchen table across from both of us. My mother put the diary in front of him and opened it to the October 31st entry and pointed to the sentence. He read it. He looked up at me. "You wrote this on October 31st, he said. The same thing my mother had said. The thing everyone would say when they read it, because October 31st was before either child had died. And that was the fact that changed everything." "Yes," I said. He looked at my mother. "This is what I've been missing," he said. "The FDA inquiry is open, but it's slow because we don't have anything from inside the program. Everything I've filed has been from the outside, from the medical records after the fact. This is from inside. This is documented in real time." "Is it enough?" my mother said. He looked at the diary for a moment. "Not just the one entry." He turned back to the beginning and scanned forward, page by page, quickly but thoroughly, the way a doctor reviews a chart. He did not read every word. He read enough to understand what he was looking at. He closed it. "This is more than enough," he said. "I need to call the FDA contact in the morning. First thing." He paused. "There's something else. Naomi, the entries about David." She was quiet. "They're going to see these," he said. "The investigators are going to read the whole diary, not just the parts about the program. You understand what that means." She looked at the diary on the table. The bent corner. The floral cover. "I understand," she said. She did not say anything else about it that night. Neither did I. Some things you understand before you know what to do about them. And the space between those two moments is its own kind of time, not waiting exactly, but the period of carrying something you know you're going to have to act on and not yet knowing how. My mother and I sat at the kitchen table until almost 4 in the morning. She made tea. We did not talk very much. She reread sections of the diary. I sat across from her and watched. At some point she looked up and said, "You did this on your own." "I was just writing," I said. "Like Dad said." She looked at me for a long time. The expression on her face was one I had not seen before and have not found a name for since. It was not pride exactly, or grief exactly, or love exactly. It was all of those things at once, mixed with something that I think might have been the specific feeling of understanding what something has cost a person who did not know they were paying. "I know," she said. "I know." She closed the diary, set it between us on the table. Outside, the city was doing what it did at 4 in the morning. Quiet but not silent, the background hum of a place that never fully stops. My mother looked at the diary. I looked at my mother. We stayed there until the sky started to lighten. Then she told me to go to sleep and I did. And she called Ose back at 7:30 when his office opened and told him she was ready. The diary went to the FDA investigator James Chan that afternoon. Everything else followed from there. If you've been watching this story from the beginning, you know what that diary cost this family. Share it. Because the truth is only powerful when more people hear it. FDA investigator James Chan arrived in Houston 4 days after my mother's phone call. He was quiet, mid-30s, careful, the kind of person who asked the same question in 3 different ways, not because he doubted the answer but because he wanted to understand the shape of it from every direction. He had received Dr. Ose's original report 3 weeks earlier. He had received the second, more detailed report the following week. Both had moved the case up in priority. The diary moved it to urgent. He met us at the FDA's Houston field office on a Wednesday morning. He brought 2 colleagues. My mother brought me and Dr. Ose and the diary. Chen did not look at the diary first. He looked at me. "Before we start," he said, "can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Why did you write this?" I thought about it the way I always thought about questions that mattered, slowly looking for the true answer rather than the easy one. "My mother told me writers have to observe everything and write it down," I said. "My father told me the same thing. He said I see things other people miss, and I should write them down before they disappear." I paused. I wrote down what I saw. I didn't know I was writing evidence. I thought I was practicing. Chun was quiet for a moment. In 15 years of this work, he said, I have never had a witness document a case in real time without knowing they were doing it. He looked at the diary on the table. The value of what you've done here, I don't think you fully understand it yet. I'm starting to, I said. He almost smiled. Then he opened his laptop and we started from the beginning. Sterling Pharmaceutical responded within 48 hours. Their legal team filed 5 actions simultaneously. A motion to dismiss the FDA inquiry as procedurally deficient. A second formal complaint against Dr. Osei with the State Medical Board. This one more detailed than the first, citing specific instances of what they called reckless medical communication. A civil defamation suit against my mother for statements she had made at the church meeting. A request to the FDA to exclude the diary as evidence, arguing that it had been created by a minor without informed consent for use in legal proceedings. And a letter to the families of Marcus Webb and Destiny Brown informing them that the compassionate support payments they had accepted constituted settlement of any and all claims. The last one was the one that made Dr. Osei's hands shake when he read it. They're trying to use the waivers to block the families, he said to my mother. He said it quietly, the way people say things when they are very angry and have decided that quiet is more effective than loud. Can they? She asked. The waivers were signed under duress, without full disclosure, by people who had just lost a child. That's a legal argument. He paused. It's a good one. But it takes time. And time is what Sterling is buying. My mother looked at the letter. Then she set it face down on the table. Then we move faster than they do, she said. Osei's suspension came through on a Thursday. The State Medical Board's letter was 3 paragraphs long. It informed him that his clinical conduct was under formal review, and that his license to practice medicine was suspended effective immediately, pending the outcome of the investigation. He was to cease seeing patients until further notice. He called my mother from his car, parked in the lot behind his office, while his receptionist was inside telling the morning's patients that their appointments would need to be rescheduled. It's done, he said.
Paul, I'm sorry.
Don't be. His voice was steady in the specific way of someone who had made a decision before the decision was made for them. I knew this was a possibility when I filed the first report. I filed it anyway. He paused. I have 200 patients in this neighborhood who need a doctor. That's the thing I'm thinking about. Not Sterling. What do you need from us? Nothing right now. I'm going to continue cooperating with Chun from home. They can suspend my license. They cannot suspend my knowledge of what those lab results showed. They cannot suspend the fact that I saw those children. A longer pause. Just keep moving. That's what I need. She thanked him and hung up. She sat in the kitchen for a while after that. The whiteboard on the refrigerator was in front of her. She had stopped writing bills on it 2 weeks ago. She didn't look at it the same way anymore. But she looked at it now, not at what was written but at what had been erased. The electricity bill in August. The clean line where it had been. She thought about the timing of everything. The envelope. The bills paid. The truck payment. The second payment her husband had asked about through a wall at 11:30 at night. She had been thinking about it in pieces for weeks, the way you think about something you're not ready to look at directly. That Thursday morning, sitting in the kitchen after Osei's call, she looked at it directly. She knew what it meant. She had known for several days what it meant. She had been waiting, she realized, not for more evidence but for the right moment. The moment when knowing would become action, when carrying it quietly would become saying it out loud. She was done waiting. She found the second phone on a Saturday. She had gone to my father's truck to retrieve a water bottle I had left there. The blue one, the one I took to school. She opened the console between the front seats and found the bottle, And underneath the bottle, tucked against the side, was a phone. Not my father's regular phone. A second one. She picked it up. It was not locked. She looked at the call log. 14 calls over the previous 6 weeks. All to the same number. All between 9 p.m. and midnight. The most recent was 4 days ago. She sat in the truck for a long time. She was not crying. She did not cry in those weeks. She had done her crying earlier, in private moments I only knew about because I wrote down the sounds I heard through walls. By November she had moved past crying into something quieter and harder and more precise. She put the phone back where she found it. She picked up my water bottle. She went inside. My father came home at 6:30 that evening. My mother was at the kitchen table. His regular phone was on one side of her. The second phone was on the other side. He saw both phones from the doorway. He stopped. She did not look at him immediately. She was looking at the table. "Sit down," she said. He did not sit down. "Naomi, I'm going to tell you what I know," she said. Her voice was even. The voice she used when she had decided how the conversation was going to go, and was not going to be moved from it. "And then you can decide what you want to do with what I've told you." She listed everything. Not angrily, calmly, in order, the way someone presents evidence when they want to make sure each piece is heard separately. The conversation she had overheard through the office door in October, when he had told Sterling he would talk to her. The thick envelope in November. The electricity bill paid without explanation. The truck payment that had no reason to exist. The insurance premium paid 3 weeks early. The phone call through the wall. "I shut it down today. When does the second payment come through?" The second phone in the console. She named each one. She did not raise her voice. When she finished, she looked at him. "The FDA has a copy of Grace's diary," she said. "Every entry, including the ones about the envelope and the bills and the phone call. They are going to find the money. They are going to trace where it came from. And when they do, they are going to come to you." She paused. "I am giving you the chance to get ahead of it." My father looked at his wife, then at the 2 phones on the table, then at his wife again. I was in the hallway. I had come home 20 minutes before he did. I had not made a sound since I heard his key in the lock. He opened his mouth once, closed it. He picked up his regular phone, not the second one, from the table. He walked back to the door. He left. His truck started. He pulled out of the driveway. I came out of the hallway. My mother was still sitting at the table. The second phone was still there. She was looking at it. "Mom." She looked up at me. "Are you okay?" I asked. She thought about it honestly, the way she thought about things that deserved a real answer. "No," she said. "Not right now." She looked at the 2 phones. "But I will be." I sat down across from her. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then she took both phones, his regular one and the second one, and put them in her bag. She picked up her own phone and called Chan. My father did not come home that night. Or the next night. He sent a text message, to my mother's phone, not mine, that said he needed some time and that he would be in touch. My mother showed me the message because she did not believe in keeping things from me that affected me, and this affected me. I read it. I went to my room and sat on my bed for a while. I thought about the kitchen table where he had handed me the diary. The flat way he had put his hands on the table when he was being serious. Real writers observe. Write down the things that seem small. He had been right about everything he told me. He had taught me exactly the skills I needed to document what he had done. I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't entirely. I opened the diary to a new page. I wrote, December 2nd. Dad left last night. He hasn't come back. Mom called the FDA investigator. I don't know what happens next. I keep thinking about the fact that he gave me this diary. He gave me the tool I used to write down the evidence against him. I keep thinking about whether he knew somewhere that this would happen. Whether some part of him knew who he was becoming and gave the diary to me anyway. I don't think so. I think he thought he was smarter than he was. I think he thought he was managing things. He was not managing things. He was teaching me to observe. And I was observing. I closed the diary. 11 weeks from the first entry. It had 127 pages. It was ready. If someone you trusted has ever let you down the way David let this family down, comment below. You don't have to explain. Just know that this story is for you too. And share it so someone else who needs it can find it. The hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday. The Tuesday before it, my mother made chicken and rice. Not because she felt like cooking. Because I needed dinner and there was chicken in the refrigerator, and she had learned, in the 6 weeks since Marcus died and the 3 weeks since my father left, that ordinary things were the most reliable way to move through time without losing ground. You make dinner. You eat it. You wash the dishes. You do the next thing. This was not numbness. It was the opposite of numbness. It was staying present through every small routine so that the large things did not swallow you. She set the plate in front of me. I was sitting at the table with the diary open, not reading, just looking at it. The last entry was from 2 days ago. 127 pages. The lower right corner of the cover was bent from 11 weeks of carrying it everywhere. The spine had a small crack where it had been opened too many times. "Are you nervous?" my mother asked. She sat down across from me. I thought about it. Honestly, the way she had always asked me to think about things when she asked. "Not nervous," I said.
Sad.
"About tomorrow? About Marcus and Destiny?" I turned a page without reading what was on it. "They won't know I did this for them. I wrote it for them, but they can't know." I paused. That's the part that's hard to sit with. My mother looked at the diary. She didn't say anything for a moment. "Then I looked at something else," I said. "About Dad." She waited. "He gave me this diary. He taught me to write things down. And the things I wrote down were the things that are going to be read out loud tomorrow in a room full of people. Including the things about him." I closed the diary. Set my hand flat on the cover. He was right about everything he taught me. He was right about observing. He was right about the small details. He was wrong about everything else. My mother looked at me across the table. "You're 10 years old," she said. "I know. That's a lot to carry." "I've been carrying it for 11 weeks, I said. "It's lighter than it was." She reached across the table and put her hand on top of mine, on top of the diary. "We ate dinner. We did the dishes. We were in the middle of doing the dishes when someone knocked at the front door. 9 o'clock at night. My mother dried her hands and went to the door. I followed because I had learned in the previous 6 weeks that knocks at unusual hours were the kind of thing you didn't let your mother answer alone. She opened the door. Reverend Solomon King was standing on the porch. Not in a good suit. In dark pants and a collared shirt and a jacket that was not one of his church jackets. Ordinary clothes, the clothes of a man who had driven somewhere without planning what he was going to say when he arrived. He looked smaller than he had from the third pew. He had looked smaller every time I had seen him since Marcus died. I did not know if he was actually smaller or if I was seeing him differently. "My mother did not speak," he said. "Naomi, He stopped. Started again. "I need you to know something before tomorrow." She waited. "I did not know children would die." He said it plainly, without ornamentation, the way a man says something when he has decided that plainness is the only form of honesty left to him. "They told me the safety data was sound. They told me the trial was in its final phase before approval. They told me I was doing something good for this community. He paused. I believed them because I wanted to believe them. Because the money was real and the need in this neighborhood is real, and I told myself those two things made it right. He looked at the porch boards. They didn't make it right. My mother said, "Did you know it wasn't FDA approved?" He was quiet for 4 seconds. I counted. "I knew the approval was pending," he said. I told myself pending was close enough. It wasn't close enough. No. He looked up. It wasn't. I was standing behind my mother. I had been watching him since she opened the door. He had not looked at me yet. He had been looking at my mother, because she was the person he owed something to that he was trying to find the words for. But now he looked at me. I looked back at him. He was 62 years old and he had baptized me when I was 3 months old, and he had known my name since I was 4, and he had been, for my entire life, the person at the front of the room who knew things I didn't know. He did not look like he knew more than me now. He looked like a man standing on a porch at 9 o'clock at night who did not know what to do with himself. "I read in the case file that you kept a diary," he said. "That you wrote down what you saw." "Yes," I said. "I read that the first entry is from September 14th. "Yes." He looked at me for a moment with an expression I had not seen on him before. Not the pastoral expression, not the managed warmth of the man at the pulpit. Something raw. The expression of someone who has understood something about themselves that they cannot unfeel. "At the beginning," I said, "I thought you were good." He did not say anything. "I wrote that too," I said. "In the early entries. I wrote about how the church felt and what you were like and what I thought about you. All of it was good." I looked at him steadily. "I wanted you to know that. Because tomorrow they're going to read the later entries. And I thought you should know that the early ones existed too." King stood on the porch. He did not say anything for a long time. Then he said to my mother, "I have told Chun everything. I am cooperating fully. Whatever I can do to make this right, for the families, for the investigation, I will do it." My mother looked at him. "That doesn't undo what happened," she said. "I know. But it may keep other children from dying. That has to be enough. It's all there is." She closed the door. She leaned against it in the dark hallway. She stood there for a moment, her eyes closed, her hands at her sides. Then she pushed away from the door and walked back to the kitchen. I followed. We sat back at the table. The plates were still there from dinner, half cleared. The dish towel was on the counter where she had left it when the knock came. Neither of us said anything about King. There was nothing left to say about him that the diary hadn't already said. I went to bed at 10:30. I lay in the dark and looked at the ceiling and thought about the morning. I thought about sitting in the witness chair. I thought about the 5 lawyers in charcoal suits. I thought about the floral cover of the diary on the table in front of me. Bent corner, cracked spine. 127 pages of a 10-year-old girl practicing being a writer.